All right, everybody, good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock on Wednesday, March 6, 2024. I'd like to call the Housing and Economic Development Committee to order. We do have Travis Brooks, who's asked to be excused because of a prior work commitment, but if that gets finished on time, he may jump in via Zoom, just to give everybody a heads up. Taylor, do we have any public comment? Awesome. I also, too, want to welcome Taylor back, our trusted clerk. Jordan did a great job. It was almost like we didn't skip any beats, and it was great to get to work with her, and welcome back to you as well. So thanks for being here. Any changes to the agenda or edits, suggestions by members of the committee? There are 3 resolutions that were not provided with the agenda packet, but are all on the legislator's desk. But those were outlined in the agenda previously. So seeing no changes, if we could just approve the minutes of February 7th. Are there any changes or edits to the minutes as presented? Okay, all those in favor? Oh, sir.
I'll move the minutes.
Oh, okay. Is there a second? All right, great. Second. Okay, now all those in favor. Taylor, do our bylaws require us to move and second the minutes? I'd be curious because at the New York State Association of Counties meeting, we had this great presentation about a Robert's Rules person. And you can, my understanding was you can approve minutes by sort of
nobody objecting.
Okay. But I don't know what, I have to look into our specific rules. So for another day, but great, well, they've been approved. Chair's report. This is ID 12259, liaison assignments and legislator voting seats. This is on packet page 10. What we'll do here is just confirm the names on here, and then I would ask for a motion and then a second, and then any discussion. So I guess let me do it this way. Strategic Tourism Planning Board, Mike Sigler has been the legislator liaison assignment. That's a non-voting seat. Mike, you're good to continue with that. We have the Homelessness and Housing Task Force. We had Travis Brooks listed, but Veronica, I know you also attend. Is that something you'd continue to attend, or I don't see why we couldn't put both of you as liaisons and whoever's there fill in?
Yeah, it's not a voting seat, and I will be trying to attend as many as I can, regardless of whether I'm officially told to.
Great. Okay. So I will list you and Travis, and you both can work that out. As it relates to the Community Housing Development Fund, the 2023, or sorry, these are 2024. These are voting seats. Currently, we have Ann Koreman, who has been appointed to that board. I was also appointed as the alternate, and then when legislator Grandison passed away, conversation with the chair of the legislature at the time was to move up to fill his seat, but we need to memorialize that action and then have Travis Brooks listed as the alternate. So if that's without objection, that's what we'll list here. And then I also have the Southern Tier 8 Regional Board, which I currently am going to those meetings along with Heather McDaniel and Katie Borgala. And unless there's objection to that, the next one that we have is the Downtown Ithaca Alliance, which we have, our delegate is open, and we also have an alternate vacancy. And sorry, Heather McDaniel, can I ask you, do you know when the DIA meets? Off the top of your head? Okay. Sorry, I just was without some information here for a second. Is there anybody on the committee that would like to fill that vacancy or that delegate? I would be happy to fill in as a delegate or as an alternate. Just would open it up to members of the committee.
I'd be interested, since I live in downtown Ithaca, but it does depend when it meets.
Okay.
That would be,
I've reached out to find their meeting times, and I'll let you know as soon as I find out.
So could we do this, Veronica? Would you be open? I'm happy to list you and I, and if the meeting time works for you, you can fill in as the delegate, and if it doesn't work, I can list myself as the alternate and backfill that way.
sure. I just saw on their website, it says board meetings generally occur every third Monday of the month at 6 p.m. at DIA. Hope that's up to date, which would be fine for me.
Okay. So Veronica, we'll list you as the delegate, and I'll list myself, if there's no objection, as the alternate. And then just to confirm, that covers, correct, Katrina?
That covers everything. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to accept the Housing and Economic Development Committee liaison and voting seat assignments with the following people. The Strategic Tourism Planning Board liaison assignment to legislator Mike Sigler. The Homelessness and Housing Task Force to legislators Brooks and Pillar. The Community Housing Development Fund voting seats Greg Mezey and Ann Koreman, with Travis Brooks as the alternate for the county. Then also we have the Southern Tier 8 Regional Board, legislator Mezey, myself, and then the Downtown Ithaca Alliance. We have legislator Pillar as the delegate and myself, Greg Mezey, as the alternate. I've made that motion. If I could have a second. There's a second by Ann Koreman. Any conversation or discussion around that? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. How do we do, Katrina? Okay.
Gold star.
Gold star, thank you. That was most of the information I had for my chair's report. I see we have Lisa Holmes, County Administrator, here for a County Administrator's update.
Thank you, Greg. I just have a brief update as it pertains to homelessness and housing under this committee. The request for proposals is now posted for the combined outreach worker program from Whole Health. That includes the former community outreach worker program, which is funded by the DIA, the city and the county, and also the rural outreach program, and both are now combined. And we're looking for interested organizations to respond. That will be posted until March 13th, after which we'll be working with our funding partners to review the proposals in the coming weeks. And that's the only update I have.
Great. Any questions for Lisa? Okay, seeing none. Next on the agenda, we have homelessness and housing update. We've got Liddy Barger here. And Liddy, I'll turn it over to you for an update or information that you have to share. And one of the things I think I mentioned at the beginning of the year, we just hope to have Liddy and other folks come more frequently to this meeting so that we can keep this topic top of mind and be aware of things as they change. And I know Liddy has some hopefully exciting updates to share with us today.
Great. Oh, did I instantly freeze? No, I'm okay, right?
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for having me. I have a quick update specifically about one effort that the Continuum of Care and all of our partners are working on right now, and that is what we're calling the Asteri Housing Surge. So just very briefly, I think we are all probably familiar with the Asteri Green Street redesign affordable housing project. It's gigantic. Inside of that gigantic, I think it's 182 units, but don't quote me on that project. There are 40 units that are set aside and funded through Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, which is a New York State initiative to build our capacity as supportive housing providers across the state. So there's 40 set-aside units, we call it ESHI for short, if you hear me say that, for people experiencing chronic homelessness within the Asteria Affordable Housing Project. They are receiving case management services from Tompkins Community Action. But as part of Home Together Tompkins, one of the recommended interventions is something called a housing surge. And we decided to take this sort of rare opportunity to have 40 units that are going to be filled sort of all at once to kind of like practice our skills around this concept of a housing surge. So a housing surge is adopted from like FEMA style emergency management approaches to rapidly rehousing groups of people in a short time frame. And so sort of the like basics of a housing surge is that it's time limited, there's a beginning and an end, and it's a finite population that you're working with within the surge. So to do that, we use our coordinated entry process and create what's called a by name list. And so the update that I have to give today is that our housing surge, so move-ins will be mid to late May for the Asteria project. But we wanted to make sure that any person who fits this criteria of chronic homelessness was just sort of like ready to go with their documents, identification, the things that they need to have a successful transition into this housing. So we started on February 1st with the creation of our by name list. We had actually sort of like a pre-surge activity where we let everybody who fills out coordinated entry referrals know this is, you know, there's some new permanent supportive housing coming online. If you know people you think who are chronically homeless who might fit the criteria, now's the time to do coordinated entry. On February 1st, we pulled from our entire list of coordinated entry. It was 156 people on that date. We took a look at all the data for those folks and identified, 60 persons who were sort of like preliminarily eligible, fit the criteria of chronic homelessness based on the way that they had answered certain questions or their length of time in our homeless response system. And then we started meeting weekly as a group with the surge team. When we started meeting, the first thing we did was assign a point of contact to each person who was on that by name list of 60 people. And that the first thing that point of contact was tasked with doing was sort of making contacts, making sure that the person was still sort of interested and motivated on a path that made sense for them to pursue this opportunity, and started what we call the pre-screening process. So for a couple of weeks, we worked on pre-screening folks. We went through the entire list to identify people who might have or did have things that were like hard no's or bans that we knew that they were ineligible to move into the property, because we certainly didn't want to like start a process with a person who once they got to the other end, we're going to find out, oh, actually you're categorically ineligible to live in this property for whatever reason. We also are working with Asteria as a partner in our surge, and we're able to ascertain who had like prior bans from Vecino Group property management stuff in the past, either from Art House or other experiences, and who may have had a prior experience with Vecino but would be able to come back into their properties. So we took some time, lots of communication, it's great. People really love working towards something all together. There's a lot of good energy about it. And at this point, our list is 42 people. Like I said, there's 40 units. And so feels like we're pretty close to having our full by name list of people who are selected for entry into this permanent supportive housing project within Asteria. Those are many words. That's sort of like the most basic sort of review. Now we've moved on, we're in our document collection stage, so folks are filling out chronic homeless verifications. They're working on gathering what they need ultimately to have things like photo ID, social security card, birth certificates for their children. And that's going to take some time, and points of contact are working with that. with the persons that they have on the list, obviously. I thought it would be interesting to share, we have what we're calling some quick facts about some of the demographic information for folks that are included in our surge. I shared this yesterday at COC, and I think it's interesting, and I'm going to share it again today. So this is just some basic information about the people who are on the by name list who are headed towards permanent supportive housing program at Asteri. 100% of them, I feel like this is something I forget to mention, but I'm going to say right off the bat, 100% of them have a disability. So in order to meet the eligibility for chronic homelessness, a person has to have both a disability and either a year of uninterrupted homelessness or a series of homeless events within a period of time. So 100% of the people moving in are people who have a disability. The age range of the folks who are on the by name list is between 20 and 63. 46% are men, 53% of them are women. 22% of the people who are on the by name list are people of color. 75% of them are domestic violence survivors. 25% have income, mostly earned income. 25% of them are part of a household that's more than one person. So that could either be 2 adults living together as a couple, or a parent and a child, or somebody who has a reunification plan with a child. This one kind of only makes sense to people who do coordinated entry stuff, but the average vulnerability index score, which is the score that's generated through the coordinated entry assessment, the average score for folks was 11, which is what I would call like a high medium. And then finally, the last sort of tidbit that I have to share about the housing surge demographics is that about 31% of them were sleeping outside the night before they did their coordinated entry screening, so we can reasonably say they're likely to be outside again. 36% of them were in our emergency shelter. And the rest were either what we call somewhere else, which is actually mostly exiting institutions like jails or treatment facilities. And then 20% are coming from doubled up situations, and those are 100% youth, because only youth would qualify as homeless in that doubled up situation. That's my update. It's a lot of data and information, but one of the things that's really exciting about the surge is that we're paying very close attention to data and being very careful to record what we're doing so that we can know what we need to scale, what works, what didn't work, because this is sort of a practice run at a model that is complicated and will require even more partners the next time we try it. So that's what I have to say about housing surge. Happy to answer questions or whatever, or not.
Great. Are there any questions for members of the committee for Liddy? Ann Koreman?
Thank you, Lydia. I have 1 or 2 questions. So thank you. It was a lot of information, but I think it was important, to hear a lot of that data that you're doing. So first, an overall question: is Asteri contracting with you to get people into their application? No?
No, this is not Asteri. So, okay, yeah, that's a good question, and I really appreciate it. So, the eSHI program, when the not-for-profit providers who are doing support services for eSHI programs apply for eSHI funding, they have a choice basically about how are you going to get your referrals for these set-aside units? And Tompkins Community Action always opts into getting their referrals through coordinated entry. That's like the HUD recommended way to do it, but because it's a state program, you don't have to. We are sort of working on our relationship with Vecino Group in other areas, but being the referral source for the permanent supportive housing programs is kind of baked into the homeless response system and the eSHI funding more than Vecino itself.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I understand it
Yeah.
a little bit better, yes, but I'm happy to hear that, the main thing is that a great program like yours is helping people, screening people and helping people that really need it. And so you mentioned, one of the last things you said was, I think it was regarding youth, double up? Was that what you were saying? And
Doubled up.
What does that mean?
Doubled up is like a term that people use interchangeably with couch surfing. It just means that there's more people in a household than
really should be, there's beds for.
There's extra people, family members.
Okay, and you, was one of the figures 75%
Isn't
for
that a
domestic
terrifying
violence?
bit of data? Yeah.
Yes, okay.
It's self-report. It's a self-report item. It shows up in 2 assessments that we have, but that is the self-reported number of survivors in our search.
Wow. And then one of the other data points, 31% were sleeping outside the night before the assessment. Yeah. When was the assessment? What time of year?
It was probably we used our entire coordinated entry list as of February 1st for the basis of our by name list. That said, my understanding and belief is that most of the folks who were sleeping outdoors had been screened fairly recently and reported sleeping outdoors at least 1 or 2 nights,
So during the winter?
During the winter, yeah.
Okay. So one of my big takeaways, which I hope anybody watching this is seeing, the intense need for these folks and the advocacy to help get them into housing and the supports, that they're going to continue to need, and that we need to figure out how to continue to support them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think, it's an exciting opportunity for folks. It is permanent supportive housing, these 40 units that I'm talking about. So it is only paid, anytime you hear a continuum of care person say permanent supportive or even the word housing first, you can assume that there's case management services baked into the housing. And that's what these units are as well. So it's hopeful.
Thank you.
Other questions for Liddy? I guess more of a comment. Liddy, this is great. I know you shared some of this information previously in another setting, but it was great to get some of those quick facts and that data points that you outlined. And I also know that you're all on top of it, but just would want to make the statement here. Would love to make sure that we can continue to track this surge, right? And I know that's something you want to do, but I would love for this committee to be able to have a full understanding of sort of what you gave today, how the next phase of the process works, and keep a lookout for it for some period of time to understand success rates and whatever the metrics are that are used in these scenarios. I don't know what those are, but I'm curious to have a better understanding so that we can be more educated and knowledgeable on this type of program and this effort as we continue to address the issues we have within our community.
Yeah, great. Yeah, one of the things I'm looking forward to is that it is all going to be tracked. So as soon as they're done with the surge program, they're going into a program that's already entering data into HMIS, and that is one of the programs we use for our system performance. So it is already tracking things like returns to homelessness, length of time, all of the things that how you measure success. So it's pretty seamless in that way.
Fantastic. Well, that's great to hear. Well, if there's no other questions for Liddy, I appreciate your time today and look forward to our next meeting and hearing an update on how the surge and other efforts are going. Thanks. Have a great day. The next item on the agenda is a resolution. This was included just the title only, the body of the agenda, legislators you have on your seats. This was one that came out of a committee that I attended at NYSAC, the New York State Association of Counties Legislative Conference this past week. I think it was last week, beginning of last week. It's, I guess I'll just read the title and then I'll move it and then we'll go in for discussion. So I'd like to move resolution number ID 12267, urging New York State to reduce the cost of state mandated programs on local taxpayers to help alleviate the housing affordability crisis. And I would move that. There's a second by Veronica Pillar. A little context here. This is written as an advocacy resolution, and this is something that I think we need to continue to be strong on our advocacy and holding our state elected officials accountable to make sure they really understand the full implication of some of the cost shifts that they're making and how that our tax system in New York State puts that cost back on the taxpayers through having to increase levies to property tax, but it also challenges us to do new and innovative things to address specific issues within our community, and it also kind of forces us to really weigh what programs we may or may not be able to do in any given budget year. So I know that this is kind of a lofty request of the state, but I do feel that across New York State, housing affordability continues to be a problem, and the state has to do something more creative and more aggressive to not balance their budget on the backs of local municipalities. So that's why I bring this forward today, and I guess would open the floor for discussion. Ann? Or Veronica, sorry, I didn't know who was.
Reading it.
Okay.
I think one of the things that this helps do when we are requesting that the state help more financially instead of shifting the burden to a more local level. I think for me, I think of it as an equity issue. And I believe it's more equitable for the state to help us and the state to figure out how they're going to pay for this and then spread that cost over the whole state and all the taxpayers. When I talk to folks at different municipalities and whether it's people that reside in different counties or officials that are legislators or officials at towns or villages, it's really hard when you could have one particular area that has a greater need, and then you get into this cycle of then they have to pay for this or raise their taxes, or they're not, they can choose to not help those people. And so I think having a state program and a state-funded program makes more sense. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Ann? Veronica?
Yeah, thank you. I finished reading it now. I'll also support this, and I have maybe a few edits I would want to make, but I don't have like wording ready right now, but this is committee. We'll vote on it later. The thing I think is really important here is the second to last whereas, which says, talking about all these cost shifts, it says, whereas all of these cost shifts have been used to provide relief to the state financial plan, but does so by essentially substituting more regressive local taxes for the more progressive state tax structure, which has a direct and negative impact on local taxpayers and affordability in New York State. And to my mind, that's kind of a crux of this issue, is that when here at the county, our budget shortfalls can be made up with property tax. In fact, that's kind of that's the only thing that we can just directly say, this is how much of a tax levy we're making. The state can collect income tax, which is a much more progressive structure just by nature and by design, whereas property tax is by nature more regressive, and I guess by design it's just per property value, as nothing like, there's no further equity baked into it beyond equitable assessments. So moving costs from the county to the state would spread out those costs in a way that's just more affordable by all, even if the total cost didn't change, and even if, you know, it's all kind of ultimately paid by the taxpayers, it would get distributed differently, and in a way that matches more the rest of the country. The only other thing I wish were in here is, at least to me, the programs described are like, they're all good, they're all providing good services, not necessarily in the most efficient way, but I think, like, you know, healthcare, preschool special ed, legal defense for those who can't afford to hire their own, like, those are all important. We're not saying, I hope, that we would want any of those services to be cut. We just want them to be paid for by the state, which has different funding streams and different coffers than any of the counties do.
Yes, I would agree. Those are critical programs that need to continue to be refined and improved. And I think the resolve where it says the Tompkins County Legislature urges the state legislature and Governor Hochul at a minimum to freeze the growth of county costs for all state mandated programs, and further to include significant new funding to reduce or eliminate the $14 billion in annual payments counties make for state mandated programs as part of the state fiscal 2025 budget and beyond. It by no means is a critique on the programs that we're providing. It's more on how we pay for those. Mike Sigler.
Well, since I'm the only one that hasn't spoke, I want to say no. I thought this was really well written. I mean, on the one hand, we could have shrunk it down and just focused on Medicaid and said the state should take over Medicaid. I think we've made that call before, not in a while, but we have. Or you could have even expanded it to include schools and having the state take over schools for better equity. But I think this covers a lot. I mean, you certainly did a good amount of research on it. I mean, I'd like to recognize that the counties actually do a lion's share of what the state says it wants done. I mean, when we're talking mental health, when we're talking drug treatment, homelessness, policing, jail, and those programs to keep people out of jail, it's the counties that really carry the water for the state on that. Granted, the state does kick in some money for a lot of that, but in a lot of cases they do not. And lastly, I just want to close with saying, if this were to happen and the state were to take this off our books, it would then be our responsibility to make sure that money then goes back to the taxpayers. And when we have that opportunity to do some of that every year, when our assessments go up, we have an influx of money, and we should be lowering our tax rate in line with the assessment. Same idea here. If the state were to take over these costs, I would hope that enough county legislatures would say, well, we're not going to just pour that money into county services or new services, or that money should go to lower property taxes. And I hope that would be the reaction of a lot of legislatures. And that might be something the state would want to consider, kind of wheeling and dealing with the counties and getting some type of agreement beforehand before actually doing this. So,
all valid points, and I appreciate you raising those. I view this again too. This is how do we make New York an affordable, enjoyable place to live, right? I think we can check the enjoyable box. We've got a lot of great things in New York State. Now we really need to look at affordability. This also too, Mike, to some of your comments, and again, this is really kind of outside our committee, but conversation for legislatures to be had across the state is there an opportunity in maybe the first few years of if Albany could ever get behind something like this, could we make greater investments in infrastructure? Could we do certain things that would allow for a different type of housing surge, where new construction or adaptive reuse of existing buildings was encouraged in a way and supported in some way through partnerships or other opportunities, grant programs. I just think that there's so much that we could be doing if we weren't strapped with some of the costs of Albany mandated programs. And that's sort of where I come to this resolution from. But ultimately, is trying to keep New York and Tompkins County an affordable place to live, to survive, and ultimately thrive within the community. So a lot of different angles we could probably go after on this one. But any other debate needed on this resolution? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
I would say that when this goes forward, it would be good if it wasn't on the consent agenda and it was just so that it's more notice is taken of it, to be honest with you.
Sure. Could we request that this be under a committee and not on the consent agenda, Taylor? Thank you. All right, the next one on deck is Chris and Ty here with Workforce Development. So if you guys want to make your way to the table. Chris and Ty are here, and Ty, I'll let you introduce yourself to the group to give an update on workforce development, particularly a little bit around youth employment and the good work that we're doing there. Again, this is just introductory. Hope to have Ty back in the future for a more in-depth look at how we're supporting youth and some of the youth programs that we're doing. But I'll turn it over to you, Chris and Ty.
All right, great. I know we're short on time, tight schedule, so I'm just going to give 2 quick department updates, and then we will go to the star of the show, Ty, our youth director. First, we have our youth employment resource team field trip on Thursday, March 21st at 2 p.m. That will be at the Learning Web, so y'all are invited. You asked before, so feel free to shoot me an email. The executive director, Olin Mack, is going to give us a tour, and then we'll have a very informal Q&A, just a chance to get to know him more and learn more about the organization. And second part, we had a info session, direct to work, pathways to manufacturing, info session at the Career Center today. 22 people signed up, 18 showed up, and then 12 people signed up to do the next step, which would be an interview at the IAED office. So we're very excited about that. There's going to be another info session if you're interested in the Pathways and Manufacturing program on March 22nd at 10 a.m. at the IAED office downtown. If you want more information, I would just Google IAED, direct to work, and then the top link there should give you more information about the program and how you can sign up and go to that info session. So those are the 2 main updates that I had. So today here we have Ty Basilius. She's our youth team director. She heads our youth programs. Along with that, she also has been managing the Career Center because our the previous person, our department restructured with the Office of Employment Training, and the interim director resigned in January. So Ty's actually been taking over a lot of the daily operations, overseeing what's going on top of doing the youth stuff. So she's usually the first one at the Career Center and then the last one out. And then if she isn't the last one out, that she's going somewhere across the county to meet a youth and help them out or try to develop a sort of a program. So like Greg said, this is just time to get to know Ty. So she's going to go over some of the rural outreach that she's doing, because I know that's a priority of this committee and the county as a whole. So she's just going to talk about what she's been doing in that area, and then you're free to ask questions. And then we can also come in at a later date for a longer presentation about the youth programs we offer. But pass it on to you.
Thank you, Chris. That was a nice introduction. Yes, as he said, my name is Ty Basilius, and we have definitely had a lot of restructuring and staff adjustments. So trying to make a point to do outreach in rural areas has been challenging over the past year. So our strategy has been the path of least resistance, and those 2 municipalities have been the town of Ulysses and Groton. Actually today, right now, 2 of our youth transitional workforce specialists are at the Trumansburg High School. We have partnered with the town of Ulysses to do a civic engagement pilot program. So this is actually the 2nd cohort. The first cohort went really well. We do more of like the workforce development, kind of like resume building, lots of different types of workshops, trying to make it fun and engaging. And then the second half would be their kind of civic engagement with the comprehensive steering planning committee. So it's a really nice balance of like civic engagement and workforce development. It's nice to be able to do that outside of summer youth employment, because I know that the town of Ulysses has kind of took that on their own. We used to partner and do summer employment in that municipality. So it's nice to have that connection still. And so Rachel Kennedy, Caitlin, and Niels, the planner, have been great. And we hope to continue doing those types of programs there, and maybe model it to other municipalities. And then in Groton, their school district has been amazing with building up like STEAM programs, and their career center has been amazing. So being able to partner with Billy Downs out there has been great. Hoping to, within the next month, concentrate on building up more work placements to start doing the summer youth employment out there more. Obviously, transportation has been a barrier for all of the rural youth. So really trying to be creative in planning that for this summer to really try and get our kids engaged. Last summer, we partnered with, not really partnered, but does a lot of the kids within the city limits. So obviously we're county department.
Can I just ask you something real quick?
Yes.
You're using some acronyms.
Okay, sorry.
Can you, like STEAM and YES?
Oh,
I know what
yes.
YES is.
Yeah.
But if you could just say what those are.
Science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing. I think that's it, yeah.
And the YES is the Youth Employment Services?
Service, yes, yeah. So their summer youth employment is like a well-oiled machine for the city, and so we've been really trying to concentrate in the rural areas.
Okay.
So Groton, we've built up, and then we're hoping to concentrate more in Newfield, Lansing, so yeah. I'm trying to, I don't know what and I like to hear the report on Liddy's report, because all of our participants, we encourage them to sign up for the Asteri. So I look forward to hopefully partnering with them. Okay.
Sorry, you caught me just at a moment where I didn't expect you to pause.
I planned that, sorry.
Questions for Chris or Ty?
I had one for Chris. So I didn't catch you. You're giving us a lot of information. So one of the things you said at the beginning was about inviting us to an event.
Yeah,
and I can't remember what that was.
We run the Youth Employment Resource Team, which is a group of providers throughout the county. So Ithaca Youth Bureau, Learning Web, INHS, really anyone's welcome if they directly or indirectly serve youth. So that was in my update last month, and I said that we do field trips every month sometimes. So this month we're going to the Learning Web for our monthly meeting. So I was extending that invitation to this lovely committee. So I think people would be happy to see y'all show up. And we also have future ones. So it's like if you can't make this month, we'll be going to other locations like at the Youth Bureau, TSC BOCES, TC3.
What's the date, time, and location?
March 21st, Thursday, March 21st at 2 p.m. at the Learning Web.
3 p.m.?
2 p.m.
2 p.m. at the Learning Web, which is...
I'm drawing a blank on the address. Ty probably knows.
Buffalo Street, 620 Buffalo Street, I think.
All right, we can look that. Okay.
Yeah.
They're still in the house that they occupy?
No, they moved. So they're in, I'm trying to think of what the housing development is near the BJM.
It's like Founders?
Founders Way.
Yeah,
Founders Way. They're in Founders Way.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions for Chris or Ty? All right, well, seeing none, I appreciate you taking the time and providing the update. And if anybody can make that Thursday, March 21st at 2 p.m., members of the committee, look forward to hearing back on what's your participation or what you experienced. And appreciate you extending that invite and look forward to keeping the conversations going. Thanks so much. Ty, it was nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, Planning and Sustainability Department. We have a report discussion This is the New York State Housing Summit Debrief ID 12260. I'll turn it over to Megan, and I know Veronica was also in attendance, and there was several other folks from county, city that attended. So just wanted to take a few minutes to hear any takeaways or any updates from that event.
Sure, and if you'll allow me to cheat for a minute, although we didn't have a formal report today, we've got a couple quick announcements because March is shaping up to be grant month in our department. So you may recall our municipal grants that we've had workshops in the past, and I just wanted to share that at the March 28th TCOG meeting, we're planning to make the annual announcements and share descriptions of those grants. Information will be up on our website, and we'll be pushing that information out to the municipalities as well. And of course, those meetings are recorded, so it makes it easy for anybody who can't tune in live to look back later. And also the Community Housing Development Fund, Round 24 is open to applications. This is the joint County City Cornell program that has associate members with the towns of Ithaca and Dryden. And that is taking applications for people looking to develop new or rehab permanently affordable housing units. And that's taking applications till April 4th. And since, unfortunately, we do have a vacancy in our Housing and Community Development Planner, I'm happy to help anybody that's got questions on that side. And that position is posted, so we'll keep you updated on that. And then with that, are there any questions, or I'll switch gears to the summit?
Okay. Go ahead, Ann.
So you're going to be talking about, I just want to pass things down to my municipality. So you or someone will be talking at the next TCOG meeting about?
We'll have staff there to talk about things like the Housing and Supportive Infrastructure Grant Program for municipalities, parks and trails. So we've hosted separate workshops in the past, but that can be challenging for people to get to. And so we figured at TCOG.
Just at TCOG.
We'll have all the municipalities there. And of course, materials will be up on our website, all the guidelines and things like that. And that meeting will be recorded.
Okay, great. I'll encourage the municipalities in the district.
And we'll be emailing folks and things too, but we appreciate, kind of helping amplify the message. Thank you. And so with the Housing Summit, so Veronica and I, a number of chamber staff and one of their interns, CJ Randall, the director of the Town of Ithaca's planning department, actually Bruno Schickel, a local developer, was there as well. So Tompkins County was pretty well represented. I haven't heard what the final registration count was, but they seem to have a pretty good attendance, largely from municipalities, especially because they have land use authority in the state. I think it was pretty discouraging that there weren't as many state people as they were hoping, given that the summit was at the University of Albany, so we were right up the street from most of the state buildings. The event was hosted by the New York chapter of CNU, the Congress for New Urbanism. That's an organization that comes out of kind of it's the local chapter of the larger organization that goes back to the 90s and that kind of new urbanism movement. So I will say that tends to be focused on, very more small town, urban areas, walkable streets, alternatives to transportation, human scaled blocks and design, a lot of kind of neo-traditional aspects and things like that. So you can go onto their website and kind of see the different tracks that they had. But essentially they were billing this as a working summit, so to have people really break into groups, have some joint sessions, but then break into 4 tracks. And so there was a track on environmental issues and infrastructure, and that's the one that I was participating in, especially given a lot of the infrastructure conversations and how that's tying into housing that we're having locally. They had a second track that was best practices for all housing types, especially looking at, a range of housing choices, missing middle, lower rise housing that's multifamily but fits in the scale of traditional neighborhoods. They had a third track on revitalizing existing communities and downtowns and looking at state policies that support communities, helps with tax base growth. I think it was a little bit more focused on some communities that have seen, population declines, unlike ours. But also thinking about infrastructure and mixed use and walkable development. And then there was a fourth track, which I believe is the one Veronica participated in, which was creating equitable, affordable, and complete places and looking at housing policy, addressing historic injustices and inclusion. And so we were encouraged to pick a track and stick with it. So we tried to divide and conquer amongst those of us that were there so we could cover those different tracks. We also heard from the president of the National Association of Home Builders, came in for kind of one of the keynotes, which, that group has, certain perspectives. It was, I think helpful hearing what they're seeing as upcoming challenges. He was sharing a concern nationwide over our construction labor, that even as hopefully interest rates come down and capital becomes a bit more accessible, and some of the building materials challenges have eased up a little bit from what we had seen, that the lack of construction labor is where the home builders are really concerned. That's going to be a severe pinch point, since I think he was saying the average age of a contractor is over 57 years old in the United States, and they are up to their eyeballs with work these days, and so many are looking forward to retirement. There was some discussion, I think, unfortunately, since there wasn't a lot of state representation there, about, kind of a desire for maybe a state-level ombudsman sort of situation to help coordinate between agencies, since I think a lot of communities experience the frustrations of trying to coordinate what, say, the DOT wants with what housing agencies providing key funding want, and making all these things work when I think from a local perspective, it's all Albany. And so wishing that there was, something like that to help. And I will say, although we haven't seen the write-up, the material from all the different working groups was being gathered together, and so I think the New York chapter was planning to write everything up, so I'm happy to share that around when it comes out. I'll say they were gearing up for the national conference is in early May, so I think that's where attention has turned, so we haven't seen the actual written materials come out of this. I will say in the environmental and infrastructure group, we kind of went off on a tangent about frustrations around Sigler and what its purpose is versus what some of the impacts were. Again, these are things that any change would require changes at the state level, and so trying to also think about what locals can do. And so hearing from one municipality that's really looking at generic environmental impact statements, and also looking at their form-based code and subdivision regulations and things to try to lay out the development process and decisions so clearly that they are clearly administrative matters. They're not discretionary decisions. And so making sure that when Sigler applies, it's for projects that are, really have that discretionary nature in them. There was a lot of talk about parking, which I think is part of the perspective of that group. But it was interesting to hear even the National Association of Home Builders group saying, how they also are advocates of eliminating parking requirements because, believing that home builders and developers are trying to build for what the market needs and wants. And so, that is not necessarily what old parking requirements are these days. There's some interesting conversation about, actually, we've been talking about assessments a lot, but that the real value of a property is typically in its buildings. Parking is not really typically contributing much to the assessed value, and so how some communities have been removing their parking requirements to, hopefully encourage more productive uses on their land and helping to increase the value and the use of what they've got. There were some presentations there. Onondaga County was represented since they recently updated their comprehensive plan. They're in a somewhat different situation than us since they don't distribute sales tax the same way we do, and so they're able to kind of use that funding in a different way to support their municipalities comprehensive plans and other things to kind of knit together with the county's plans. But they are also seeing, villages eliminating parking requirements and reducing parking requirements townwide, trying to start matching up with the county's comprehensive plan. They were noting that they are now moving on into a housing market assessment, I think especially with Micron and other things happening up that way. And they're really noticing the reduction in households with children and how that's changing the housing and the housing types and housing locations that are desired. And I've just spoken a lot, so I wanted to see if Veronica, since I wasn't in your track, if there are some things that you wanted to add from there.
I have a bunch, that was great. I have a bunch of things to say, and I'll try not to be long or duplicate, but can I actually ask you two questions? First, the embarrassing one. Form-based codes came up a lot at the summit. I don't actually know what they are. Can you tell us?
Yeah, this probably isn't the textbook definition, but essentially the idea is that it's not, so zoning originally was a lot about separating uses, and we talk about mixed use a lot because we realize that also kind of aligned with a lot of the 20th century automobile dependency. And so with form-based code, it's not as much about the use, it's actually about the form of what's going on a property, the buildings that are going there. And so it may be that, the character, you want to promote new construction in an existing traditional neighborhood that has a lot of single-family homes. And so it's really about laying out guidelines for the form that building takes. And so that building fits in with that character, but it might be a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex. It just kind of reads that it fits in with its context. And so actually locally, the town of Ithaca has developed several years ago its form-based code for areas of the town of Ithaca, and so that's a local example we have.
Thanks. And my other question was, I was also impressed with the Onondaga County presentation, and one thing the person from there talked about was looking at just on a map the places where like zoning and development as it existed could encourage more, and kind of like physically laying out their housing, what they have and what they need. And I know we have a county housing-based assessment, but and I know that we don't have the same influence over our municipalities as they do, but is our housing needs assessment location-based in any way?
So we have the housing needs assessment actually has a lot of parts to it, separate, and so that was what fed into the housing strategy. And so the needs assessment, as I recall, it's more breaking down from the urban area to the outlying areas versus, and then I will say the housing strategy itself doesn't assign, say, 400 units to this village and, 600 to that town. It's not that location specific, but it is specific in terms of, what was desired in the urban core versus outlying areas and aligning with the county's development focus area strategy. So recognizing that infrastructure capacity and other things would play into what different specific municipalities could accommodate.
Cool, thank you. And then can I share some of my notes from it? I tried to organize this sort of takeaways from, I get the whole group, but also our group, into the categories of finance, planning, transit, and bureaucracy. And I think Megan hit on at least something from all of these. For financing, a common theme was just, we need money, everyone needs money to do like the development that we want to do. And of course, not every person in the summit wants the same thing, but to kind of get to this idea of like walkable mixed use, like livable for everyone communities. I guess right now, a lot of things like low income housing, which came up a lot in my breakout track, is funded by the via the low-income housing tax credit, which per like the developers there encourages large-scale development, but there's not much of a way to encourage small-scale development. Someone also described tax incentives around housing as, quote, a Rube Goldberg machine of carrots and sticks, which can't possibly be the best way to do things. And so some ideas tossed out were, someone pointed out, also talking about like owning a home versus renting, that a 30-year mortgage is sort of like rent control for homeowners, but there's nothing for renters. And that, maybe we should think about that. Someone suggested, and these aren't really answers, but is there a way that developers can get paid for the actual building of the buildings as opposed to by the rents that come in on the back end? Because having the building existing is not the work that they're providing. It's building the building and getting there from being nothing to housing. But in our current structure, that's not quite what is compensated. People also brought up needing more money for land banks and land trusts, and could we turn in rem foreclosed properties into affordable housing by putting deed restrictions on them? And I hadn't actually looked at these notes till last night, so I didn't plan this with something I talked about yesterday at the meeting, but same ideas coming from different places. About planning, there were, in multiple sessions, people talked about that we have to get serious about comprehensive planning and aligning codes and zones and such to the plan so that we as communities can move toward the built communities we want, instead of having things piecemeal and not comprehensive. And so then, not every time, but a lot of time, you want to build something, you have to take it to a bunch of planning boards, and a vocal local minority can block the project. And it's like one little thing at a time and you don't get anywhere. Someone also said we've got to get over this idea that planning is socialism, or we have to embrace socialism. Not my quote. There was, I guess, kind of related to that, multiple people said that trust goes a long way in like getting if you have a desired project through in a community. There was a low-income housing developer working on Long Island who talked about building low-income housing in Brookhaven, which is a lot of wealthy people, space, cars tend to oppose these projects, but they did like trust building communication work before, like early on in their process, and nobody came out to oppose the project when there were public hearings for it, which is really impressive, I think. And one other thing, maybe this isn't about planning, that came up multiple times is that the state of aging utility infrastructure is often an obstacle for development, because a lot of times building in a place like also requires the pipes and wires and all the infrastructure to get there, and no one developer for one project wants to take on the burden of replacing like all the infrastructure for everyone, but then who's going to? And maybe this is a task for government at some level. About bureaucracy, Megan already talked about seeker and also zoning barriers. A lot of people talked about there needs to be more stuff than just single family allowed as of right in zoning. As of right is a phrase I did learn at the conference. And someone named that the culture in New York State is not to help people who want to build through the development process and through all the bureaucracy, but there's no real reason why that has to be the case. If like government at some level could in theory have some sort of like an ombudsman idea, I think that Megan brought up, could be offering assistance to people to like make it through the process, and not to like skip and bypass steps, but just to do that cumbersome work. And one other thing, as there weren't many people from the state, as Megan said, but the New York State Deputy Secretary of State for Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure spoke at the beginning of the first day. Keisha Santiago is her name. And she said that the State Department very much wants to help people like make these community building projects happen, is interested in partnering on things and finding out what the obstacles are and getting people, communities past them in whatever way. So putting that out there, because I'll say I didn't really know what our State Department of State does, or maybe even that we had one, but they want to help us. And then finally, yeah, cars came up a lot. Car-centric culture is a big problem. Someone told a story of, I think, like working in or running a store or something in a downtown and having people come in and say like, oh my gosh, there's no place to park here. There's just nowhere to park. And they're like, oh, so how did you get here? And they're like, well, I parked at wherever they parked. So it's like, okay, there's not literally nowhere to park. Another person, I think Brian Culpa, town supervisor of Amherst, New York, was talking about their work that seems impressive, turning a dead mall into a neighborhood, turned a country club's golf course into a central park, which sounds very exciting. He said, quote, "The best places in the world I've ever been to have a parking problem." Like, we have lots of problems, and maybe it's okay for parking to be one of them, because as Megan said, it's a pretty low-level use of space. And then part of getting past that, something that came up was ending stigma about things like public transit and like social housing, that those can be for everyone, not just people who can't afford this, that, or the other way to live or way to get somewhere. Everyone can ride public transit. Everyone, if we had social housing, it could be for everyone. I don't see that happening in this country anytime soon, but it does other places. That's about it.
Thank you both for that update. If members of the legislature have questions, happy to entertain those now. You know, Veronica, there's one thing that you did mention that resonated, and having experienced this just personally in a few of our municipalities, I will go out on a limb and say I do feel the planning staff in most cases are very helpful in navigating the process. Unfortunately, the process is just not a good one. So they may feel like the barrier to many developers or people looking to just wanting to add a garage to their house or an in-law suite or something like that. I can say that just from my personal experience, it's maybe not because of a lack of desire from the staff to help in that process. It's unfortunately we have some places that either have pretty restrictive processes or zoning or things like that. So I just want to make sure we draw a distinction between the staff's ability to support and the system in which they're injected into, of which they have to kind of support and guide people through. And that sometimes I think is the bigger issue, because I feel strongly, as critical as I can be at times about land use regulations, we do have a good team of people within Tompkins County and throughout our local municipalities that are helping navigate that. Now we have to get the voters and the elected officials that have land use control to really do something about what they have in their community and how they can contribute to the solution and not further exacerbate the problem. So I guess that's my one takeaway, but there's a lot of great stuff in there. I just wanted to get that out there to recognize our staff that do this work every day. Mike? Sorry.
I was just going to say thank you for that. I think what people were expressing was sort of an overall impression of the statewide culture. I don't have personal experience working with planning staff here, so I'm glad to know that that part is positive and supportive locally.
Mike Sigler?
Mine was actually a question. I've been talking to Heather about this, the Fast New York program, and to get building of housing, and are we prepared as a county to give the towns any kind of guidance on that? I mean, Dryden was very successful in theirs becoming a housing community, right? I mean, and Ithaca's applying. I've encouraged Lansing to do the same. I just didn't know if they had any questions, if we as a county were prepared to kind of
So that's a great question, because I actually have Fast New York written, so I wrote it down on the top of my paper as we were going through this, because Heather was at an event, Governor's Budget, and I think we were both at the same thing, and sorry, Heather, you made a comment about state funding for shovel-ready projects as it relates to housing development, not just industrial development. Am I understanding the context correctly? And Heather, you're welcome to join the conversation if you'd like. And so if somebody more informed than I could maybe touch on Fast New York, or what, just for context, that would be helpful.
Sorry, pro-housing.
Fast New York is a shovel-ready infrastructure program for industrial sites. So if you identify a 100-acre piece of land as an economic development agency, you can apply for money from the state to bring infrastructure to the site: water, sewer, electric, whatever, roads, fiber, all that stuff, so that you can then market the site to businesses. That's how Micron happened on a very large scale. But I've sort of been coining this: we need Fast New York for housing. What if a municipality could bring in funding that would allow them to bring the water and sewer to the site, put in the road, put in the sidewalk, put in all the fiber? That's going to reduce the cost to a potential developer. And then the land is marketable and someone could buy it and build, you know, a new neighborhood or a new block or whatever that is. So I'm coining that term. We need Fast New York for housing. I think the other thing that Mike mentioned was this pro-housing designation. My state association is saying it's not really legal to tie it to other state funding, but the governor is very much in support of, if your municipality is not pro-housing designated, you are not eligible for all kinds of state funding sources, including Restore New York, including, I could name lots of things, New York Forward, DRI, that kind of thing. The governor was in Binghamton on Friday. I was there when she gave her budget presentation. There are 10 active applications in the 8-county Southern Tier region for pro-housing community designation. The village of Dryden, the village of Groton were two of the first in the state to be designated pro-housing. I know that the city of Ithaca their application is in the works. So that's where pro-housing stands today. But, you know, the governor has very much talking about, we need housing of all types and sizes, and we really need to be conscious about how we support housing. And, you know, she talked about zoning and regulations and how regulations really impede the time it takes to get housing developed, which time is money for a developer. The longer they need to hold a parcel, the more it costs them. So
I know, Heather, you and I have talked at length a little bit, and Megan, we've touched on some of the pro-housing designation, and we're now joined also too by Katie Borgella. You know, I think it's something that we want to talk about and understand in this committee at a future meeting. And I know we had some email exchanges back and forth about that. And at some point, it is something that local municipalities with land use can go through. It's not something like, we can't be a pro-housing county, as great as that would be. But it is something that is for the local municipalities. But just trying to understand, is there a role, a support, a convener, a cheerleader, champion role, whatever the case may be, that the county can play, trying to better understand that, and then also potentially maybe host someone here in this committee from the state to give a little bit more of an in-depth presentation on it at some point, but then also trying to encourage our municipal partners to do what they need to do to get that designation. And I'll turn it over to Katie.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to add, I don't know that we've really talked to you all very much about one of our initiatives that we're going to be doing this year, which is convening all of the municipal planners to talk about what the burning issues are in their community every planner everywhere is getting pressure about fixing housing. So we just want to brainstorm together. I'm sure this program will come up. Maybe that's where they want support from us, but we're basically offering to convene, coordinate, do the background research on some, topics that might be of interest to them, recognizing that they have their plates full and we could help with that. So there's kind of this open-ended approach that we're going to be implementing over the course of the year. So really looking forward to it. Abigail Connor is going to be leading that effort in the department, and she's gotten tremendous feedback so far. Everyone is really excited about getting together and trying to figure out what we can do to support the entities that actually have the land use authority in the county.
Great, and I know that the planning function kind of straddles a little bit peak and HED. So as information pertains to either or from those conversations, I don't want to speak for your committee, but I'd assume you'd also welcome that discussion in peak if it makes the most sense.
Right, I was going to just mention that at our next meeting on Monday, part of what we're doing is it's going to be on the agenda to accept the building code administration and operations study. And so there's another piece that, that the county's doing, which is tremendous. I mean, the amount, since I've just been in office, the amount of outreach and coordination with the municipality. So that's just another way to have people work together, within the different municipalities that I think, hand in hand with the other things you're doing, the more people are talking and working together throughout the county, I think we're going to be able to help the municipalities tackle those problems and facilitate them to working together.
And I would say that study, we're hoping key parts get implemented, and it will have an impact on housing as well, because it's dealing with the people who have to implement all of the rules and regulations at the municipal level and making their lives easier and more efficient.
Right, rather than being fragmented and just different depending on where you go in the county.
Heather, I did see your hand.
I know this housing issue is such a hot button topic, and it's been a big topic for many, many years. I was the housing planner at the county decades ago, and a lot of it has been a conversation since then. And I think it's great to bring the planners in and talk about really long-term things and things that they can do. I think when you talk about initiatives, it's really easy to sort of say, okay, we have all these big things that we need to take a lot of time on. At the same time, one of the things that the county's housing task force is doing is sort of identifying is there low-hanging fruit? Are there some easy items that we could check off the box that will, help to give us some momentum? And the pro-housing designation is not a program, it's just a designation. There are 2 tracks. You can show that you have had a certain percentage increase in housing over the past 3 years or the past 1 year and go through that track to get pro-housing designated, or the other option is to say, we would like to see more development and identify ways that we might be able to support more development in our communities, and you can get designated as a pro-housing community that way. I know that the Village of Groton recently was awarded their New York Forward, which I was going to give as part of my report. The reason that we were the last region in New York State to get our New York Forward announcements, we were several weeks out of the other communities, is because the governor was making sure that all the villages, both the villages that received the 2 New York Forward announcements in the southern tier were pro-housing designated. So when I say she's serious, she's serious. We would have had announcements a month ago with all the other communities. So, maybe the pro-housing designation is something that, some entity, I don't know if it needs to be county planning, but maybe it could work with some of those planners to say, hey, there's nothing to lose here. It's, it's just a designation, and it allows you really to access other state funding.
Yeah, thank you for that information. And Heather, one of the things is I will hope we can work on, and maybe this is in conjunction with our planning team, is maybe an advocacy resolution around the fast New York type model for housing, and pushing that through to our state representatives and up through Albany. But, maybe it's something that we send to NISAC as well for them to weigh in on at a legislative conference. I don't know if these conversations are happening or if it has happened, or what the model is, but I think if it's working for industrial development, it may be a model to look at for how the state can support housing and housing infrastructure development. All right, anything else from planning and sustainability? No? All right, well, I appreciate it. Thank you for the lively discussion. This is always my favorite committee. Maybe I'm a little biased. But Heather, we'll turn it over to you now for the Ithaca Area Economic Development Report and Update.
Okay, so big congratulations to the Village of Groton, $4.5 million in New York Forward funding. This is the second round of funding for small communities for downtown revitalization. I do sit on the Regional Council. I saw their presentation. They knocked it out of the park. I was going to be really surprised if they didn't get funded. So this is a really exciting opportunity for them to actually have a planner from the Department of State come in and help them plan and look at the things that they want to fund, both private and public projects, and really grow their community. One of the great parts about their presentation, I think, that was that they had a group put together that was from age 18 to like age 63 to give their presentation. I mean, just really energized, and they all wore the same colors. So like it just went over really well. So that's great for our community. It's great for Tompkins County. I will likely sit on one of their oversight committees because I sit on the Regional Council and they require that. It might be someone else from the Regional Council. There's a couple of other people in Tompkins County as well. I know that you did get our staff report, our update in your agenda packet. I wanted to just highlight a couple of things. The IDA did approve a 5-megawatt community solar project at its last meeting in January. That would be the first community solar project in the town of Ithaca. The town of Ithaca did provide a letter of support for that project. That brings the total to 70 megawatts of community solar that the IDA has helped to assist be developed throughout Tompkins County. We are busy at the IDA internally working on all of our project reporting to the state. IDAs are very highly regulated. Everything goes to the state once a year and gets collated and put into the state's database. So for last year, we had 57 active projects at the IDA. Those projects that are completed construction and on the tax rolls paid $4.6 million in property taxes, new property taxes just last year. So good numbers. I think that's up from 53 projects last year or the year before to 57 last year. At IAED, we added a 6th staff person, Mary Holland Bavis, to be our workforce program manager. So we now have 2 staff people dedicated to workforce development. She started in January. She hit the ground running. She's been working to identify referral partners, really social service agencies and other agencies that work with unemployed and underemployed individuals, working with individuals with barriers to employment, to pipeline people into our direct-to-work manufacturing training program. She's met with 30 partners in the first 2 months on board, and we have opened up all of our referrals for our next cohort of the entry-level manufacturing program, which is called Direct to Work. So she and Danny both have been going. Chris reported that they were at the One Stop Center today. They had a really good turnout, which made them really happy. So our next cohort will run for 4 weeks, and it will start on April 8th. So we are actively doing recruitment right now. And at the same time, we are looking to grow the entry-level manufacturing training program into the building trades, and that's called Tompkins Build. So we are spending this year to identify partners. We have met with the 13 trades unions that cover Tompkins County and are working to identify training curriculum and putting together a training program for the pre-apprenticeship pathways to construction training, construction jobs, and then later this year we'll start to gear up more towards the non-union piece, which would be like a BOCES construction training kind of program.
Heather, I just was thinking about that part and how the report was that the average contractor or person working in construction was 57. So
Yes.
Thank you for the efforts
and
there.
Just to give you some context with the Micron announcements and all of the construction around Micron and the Route 81 rebuild in Syracuse, they're estimating they're going to need 50,000 construction workers in the next 10 years. So, you know, we are working as feverishly and as fast as we can and working with a number of our partners in adjoining counties as well. The last thing that I just wanted to end with, it's not really in my report, but we did start by talking about Fast New York. I'm going to end by talking about Restore New York. Restore applications are open right now, and what Restore does is it allows municipalities to apply for money on behalf of a subrecipient, which could be a for-profit or a not-for-profit entity, to do critical demolition, renovation, abatement remediation on existing buildings. The city of Ithaca has been pretty successful over the years in getting Restore money to, you know, replace all the lead around windows in some of the buildings downtown, as an example. I'm thinking Lansing Library, Mike Sigler. But, you know, if any of you have conversations with your municipalities and you have that one building on Main Street that, you know, there's someone who owns it and they'd really like to do some renovation, but they just can't quite afford to do all of it, it can be used for residential, commercial, and industrial rehabilitation. And it doesn't have to be a vacant building. It can be a building that's in use. It's a great little program. If you Google Restore New York, you can find out more about that program.
Is that a yearly program?
It's a state program that's run by the Division of Housing and Community Renewal.
It's yearly? Every year?
Every year, there's money in the budget for Restore New York.
That's great. Thank you for the update. Any questions for Heather?
So if somebody had a marina and it was
Mike.
Kind of lackluster.
Oh, come on.
Like if you needed to like gut the bathrooms or something.
Anyways, we're going to move on.
The bathrooms are nice there.
And yeah, thanks for that. One of the things, Heather, I will just continue to say, when I started on the legislature, there was a lot of conversation about the role that IAED could play in workforce development and could play as a partner in workforce development. And to see the growth since the last I think it was the contract negotiation between the county and IAED, and the progress that your team is making and the connections and the convening within the community is admirable, and should just want to continue to make sure we're praising the people doing that great work in conjunction with the partners that we have here at county and Chris's team. So it's a heavy lift, but I'm really glad to see Direct to Work and Tompkins Build, and hopefully the next iteration around the next industry that we see a workforce opportunity for.
Thank you. I will take that straight back to my staff that are responsible for workforce development, part of that team. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. All right, Direct. Just give me 1 second. Sorry, while my fingers catch up here. Yeah, Nick, you're all set to come on up, and we have a resolution under Arts, Culture, and Tourism. It's a budget adjustment, tourism program 2024 ID number 12237. I'll go ahead and move that if I could have a second. Second by Ann Koreman. So Nick, I'll turn it over to you. I know you attached a memo with that resolution, and let you give us the rundown here.
Sure, thanks. As the memo describes, we collected more hotel room occupancy tax in 2023 than we had budgeted. We met with the budget committee of the Strategic Tourism Planning Board earlier this year to discuss how to allocate that, and came up with a proposal that was shared with the full board, and then voted to recommend that. The highlights from that adjustment are $20,000 to the Arts and Cultural Organization Stabilization and Recovery Fund program administration through Community Arts Partnership, an additional $83,000 of grant payments for that program to 7 organizations that did not have fully executed contracts as of the end of the year. Some additional funding for the tourism economic impact analysis component of our visitor profile study, and some additional funding for market research that we expect we'll be looking into later this year. The balance of the funds that were not allocated here will be going into reserves. This will help bring our reserve balance up above its target for 2024, up to a total of just over 1.1 million. The memo also goes on to describe our sort of long-term goal of moving to budgeting the tourism program out of prior year's funds rather than the current year's funds. This gets us closer to that, but not all the way. So that's going to be a work in progress. But anyway, the resolution, the memo in front of you, happy to answer any questions.
And Nick, too, just to clarify, some of these budget adjustments are sort of carry forward from last year and may not be totally all surplus, but essentially unspent money in line items because of contract timing or things like that we're just moving forward. So there's a piece of that. And then in addition, there's the surplus to budget for room tax that was collected. And because of how we get the information, it's kind of mixed together in one total number.
Yeah, that's accurate, yep.
Okay. Questions for Nick on this resolution? Ann?
Yeah, I know we've spoke about this before, but I like the idea of having the amount that is budgeted based on the prior year, or having that money in hand, or at least that, well, yeah, you will have that money in hand. So that I think that's more stability for the program and everybody applying for it versus the volatility that can happen within a year. So I'm happy to see this.
Great, thanks.
So to touch on that point, Ann, because I'm a strong advocate for us moving in that direction as well, it will definitely take some time, and we'll have to look at surplus or some budgeting adjustments, things like that on how we get there. But this is the first step. And Nick, could you maybe clarify what the reserve for this program was last year? What percentage?
Last year, I believe we were at 10% of the overall program. I'll have to double check, but yeah. So round numbers, $400,000.
Yeah, so this is a significant increase, which is feedback that STPB heard from the legislature about this time, I think, last year.
Yep.
So making changes, but like any program, it's 1 year at a time.
Incremental.
So I know that the STPB is working diligently to try to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Any more discussion on this resolution? Questions for Nick? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Nick, you're welcome to stay up here as we have these next two resolutions. I'll move the first one. This is resolution number ID 12268, supporting proposals to modernize state sales tax laws to include vacation rental industry and to ensure these changes are appropriately tailored for the needs of localities. I'll go ahead and move that. If I could have a second. Second by Ann Koreman. Just quickly, this was a resolution that came out of NISAC committee as well. Currently, the way that vacation rentals and short-term rentals are treated in the New York State sales tax, they're exempt from paying sales tax. Where a hotel room, if you stay down at one of the branded hotels or anything that's licensed as a hotel, you pay occupancy tax and you pay sales tax. Short-term rentals is occupancy tax, but not sales tax. So one of the things is we're asking the state to update their sales tax law to include the vacation rental industry, but also encouraging the platforms that people use to book short-term rentals, Vrbo, Airbnb, Bookings.com, a list of other things, a list of other platforms that are out there to essentially become the sales tax vendor to collect those and remit those, and also in that process to enter into agreements to collect and remit the occupancy tax. We are one of the counties across the state that does have a voluntary collection agreement with Airbnb, but that's our only voluntary collection agreement at the time. And so it would be great if we could see a standardization across the state around occupancy tax collection, but also sales tax collection on short-term rentals and vacation rentals. That is the gist of the resolution, but it does also touch on some highlights and key information points with more New York State-centric data. So it doesn't speak to anything locally, but it's just encouraging the state to take action. Questions on this resolution?
Just a comment that recently being down in Florida, sales tax was on short-term rentals, 11.5%.
Wow. Mike?
County does, we still have that in place, right, the Airbnb?
That's correct, yeah. We have a voluntary payment agreement with Airbnb for occupancy tax, but not for sales tax.
Gotcha.
Not because we don't have that agreement, it's just because that type of short-term rental is not required to pay sales tax at the moment.
Which their lawyers knew.
So there was definitely a lot of conversation at NISAC. There's lobbying on both sides of this equation, but NISAC staff felt that there was a really good time in Albany for this to potentially have some real traction. It's come up before and has not succeeded, but they feel strongly that this could be something for this legislature in Albany. So that's why I wanted to make sure we put our support behind it. All right, well, seeing no other comments, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously as well. The next one, which is also a resolution that came from NISAC, and is Resolution ID 12269, calling for the restoration of funding for the tourism matching grant programs in state fiscal year 2025 budget. I'll go ahead and move that, if I could have a second. Seconded by Veronica. This is, right now the state has a matching grant, a tourism matching grant program, and in the governor's proposed budget, it's reduced from 3.45 million to 2.45 million. And tourism is a vital piece of New York State's economy. It's a vital part to our local economy, and it's something that I think is important for us to advocate for at the state level, to continue to make an investment in tourism, because the big I love New York and all that sort of stuff, you know, we want to draw people to our region, we want to draw people to our state, so that they spend their sales tax dollars, so that they stay overnight and pay their room tax money, but ultimately come to enjoy and appreciate everything that we as residents have on a daily basis. So this is just asking that the legislature and governor, at least at a minimum, restore it to its current budgeted amount in the 2025 budget. And I know that there's some tourism associations and things that are actually advocating for more money around this, but this is just asking for at a minimum to keep the tourism matching grants whole, essentially, in the next budget season. Any questions on this resolution? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and call for a vote. All those in favor? Okay, that also passes unanimously. Nick, thank you for your time and contribution today.
Sure thing. Thanks for bringing those resolutions.
Thank you. Any committee members' reports? Anything for the good of the Ann?
Time, yeah. So one from the town of Ulysses. For 45 years, there have been concerts in the park at Taganic Park. They called the Taganic Summer Concert Series, which began in 1979. So that's 45 years, and the park has decided to end those. And so there's a small group of local folks who are working to see if they can reinstate those. And there's a petition on change.org you can sign, so we're trying to rally support to the local park, to Taganic Park, and also at the state, the DEC is involved, the State Department of Parks. And so this group is working with those officials to see if they can be either reinstated or at a minimum permanently allow the concerts to go on with local folks organizing them and putting them on without charging an exorbitant amount to do that. So I won't go into any more detail, but I've been in contact with the group, and they've been we've had some conversations. I'll be talking to them again tomorrow. And so if folks just put it on your radar to, look for ways that we can support that going on. I think it's a real vibrant part of our community in Ulysses, but people come from outside the county also to go to those parks. It's something that people can do outside, and if you've ever been to one, it's a really a nice family gathering. People are dancing outside, you're sitting by the lake, and there's been talk of, well, if we can't have it there, could we have it at the Trumansburg Fairgrounds? I like the Trumansburg Fairgrounds, but it's not the same. It's not the lake. So this group is trying to figure out how to do that.
Well, Ann, I appreciate you raising that, and hopefully too, if we are, or if this group is successful in having it be more community organized or something like that, hopefully that there's a way, and not knowing all the nuances of the application process, but there are some STPB grants, the Strategic Tourism Planning Board, for maybe community celebrations or marketing, outdoor recreation, those type of things. Not sure which would apply or which make the most sense, but hopefully we can point them in that direction if there is a cost burden that needs to be alleviated in any way. I know that in Mike's district in Lansing, the music in the park that they do at Myers Park on Thursday nights in the summer is wildly attended, and is just a great opportunity for people to get together on that side of the community and from across the region. So it's unfortunate to hear the loss of a program like that on the other side of the lake, for that community that sometimes can be divided because we've got to go all the way around the bottom of the lake, and there's not always easy ways to just shoot right across. So,
right, and if I could comment to that. So I directed them to talk to Nick about that, and without kind of like what we often call site control, without knowing that they can have the concerts, they cannot apply for these grants.
Yeah.
So so if it turns out they have to do something like apply for a permit for each concert, and not knowing, there's no way, so they're not, for instance, right now, not able to meet the deadline to apply for grants without the guarantee from the park that they can even use the park.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So anyway, working on that.
Great. Well, appreciate your efforts on that. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, it's 4:45. We'll call the meeting adjourned. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.